we describe it as being saved. You know, in Islam, I don't know how to describe it, but there's that idea that, okay, now you're in, you've made it, right? What now? Thankfully, we as Christians, of course, we have an answer. But then what exactly is that answer? How has it been twisted? There's a temptation that a lot of us get into when we get, converted or switched, or even when we get revived or anything like that. You know, like a pastor comes here, comes for a week, they're like, yes, I want to get back into my faith. Hi, what do you do with that? Now, there's a very big temptation to remain passive, because we as human beings, we have a love for routine, we have a love for motion. So if there's one, two or three things that you can do constantly, and you can count something as done, then you just move on with your day. If you decide, here's what we'll do. Now that the pastor has brought me back into my faith, here's what we'll do. One, we have this alarm. I set my alarm for 8 a.m. 8 a.m., I'll read a verse, I'll pray. We'll do that every day. Saturday, I'll make sure I come to Sabbath school. I'll make sure I do this, I'll make sure I do that. Once, now that I've got all this down, then my faith is set. Now it's the plan where my bed will be in heaven. Same thing. But that is, not only is it lazy, it's completely against exactly what Jesus was looking for. Because what Jesus was looking for, what Jesus taught us, was that now that we have been saved, now that we've come into the faith, we are meant to be active. We are not meant to be passive in any way, shape, or form. We're meant to be completely active. Where are we meant to be active? Well, first of all, obviously, we're meant to be active in our faith. But an important thing that a lot of us tend to miss is that we're meant to be active in the world around us. We're meant to be active towards others. Not only through evangelism, but also through helping out, being present, doing what needs to be done, being helpful in whatever way you can. It's it's all throughout Jesus' speech. We talk a lot about heaven, but the fact of the matter is, Jesus didn't come here so we could go to heaven. Jesus came here so we could be saved. Jesus came here so we could understand and we could connect with God and with all that. That's why all throughout the Gospels, his message is constant. Matthew 5, verse 14 and 16 says, "You are the light of the world, let your light so shine before others." Matthew 22:39, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Matthew 5:44, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And then even the apostles echo this sentiment. You have verses like Galatians 5:16, where it says, "Serve one another humbly in love." And then Romans 12:21, "Do not be overcome by evil." And then this goes back to something I had said in another time. Salvation is something that you go into day by day. Salvation is something that you constantly move to, right? Because ultimately, the very important thing that is happening when we make the decision to be saved, when we make the decision to go into the church, is that we are making the decision to close the distance. Because there is some sort of idea that we have that God is away from us. That God is, the common idea that's taken is above. That God is away, and that that our job as Christians is to somehow attempt to climb some sort of ladder to try and get to it. That's why we're meant to stay within. That's why we're meant to go into the book, go into the prayer, go into all that. That's what it's meant for. But the beauty of salvation, the beauty of what Jesus did for us, is that he closed that distance. We don't have to run anymore. We don't have to climb. That's why things such as the temple, so many forms of ritual and all that, that's why all that was wiped away after Jesus' sacrifice. Because we don't have to reach anymore. We don't have to reach, we simply have to touch. Because with Jesus' sacrifice, God was brought to us. So now we don't have to worry about attempting to reach God or attempting to get into this idea of finally achieving faith or anything like that. We're simply meant to do what Jesus told us to do, which was to reach out to others and to give them this light that we've been given. So now that we've learned all this and we've understood it can feel a bit antithetical to all the other things that we learn. It's like, okay, so what? Now I'm meant to stop reading my Bible. I'm meant to stop going to church or anything like that. Every Sabbath I'll go out and I give. Is all this pointless? No, it isn't necessarily pointless. The point, there isn't meant to be a point. This is what life is meant to be. Life is meant to be this connection with each other, connection with God. Moving to it should feel natural. There's this idea that we have, there's this phrase that we like to use. God is a God of order. I personally do not like this phrase because it's wrong. God is not a God of order. God is a God of harmony. Because when you choose to act, because the fact of the matter is these things are natural. When you choose